Let's talk about Apple's presentations and why they are the industry standard when it comes to slide deck and keynote presentations. If you lead a team and your team does a lot of presentations, they present slide decks to clients, you're going to want to learn from Apple to see what they do because they're doing it in the top of their league. So let's look at what makes them so good. The first thing that they do really well, if you notice their keynotes, they're laid out in a story format. They rarely say, hey, welcome today, here's the new iPad, this is the new feature. They don't do that. They tell you about what came before that, what ideas they had, and how that affected their future products. So everything is laid out in a way where it's a story. And when we hear 16 different points, it has this many GB, this many teraflops of this, we can't remember all those things. It's very hard to do. But every time Tim Cook steps up, he always starts with a bit of a story. We launched the iWatch or Apple Watch, whatever you call it. We launched the Apple Watch 3 years ago, and ever since then, customers have said X, Y, Z. We've seen it used here and there. He's painting a picture. You want to start with a narrative, a story. That's the best way to get the audience engaged. What they also do really well is they set the agenda. Right at the top, they say something like, today we are going to unveil something very special in the Mac lineup, in the iPad lineup, in the Mac OS lineup. So you know what to expect going forward. Everything except the very last thing, because they saved that to say one more thing, and then they unveil that. But what they're doing is they're revealing intent, so you as a viewer, right at the top of the presentation, can know what to expect and also be excited. I want to stick around because I want to wait till they announce this. So the thing started, and the first thing they're talking about is some small improvement they've made to the Apple Watch or some small improvement to iOS. You're thinking, I don't know what they're going to talk about now. I don't want to continue investing my time. Let me just come back to it later. But if they tell you, we're going to make some announcements around iOS, Mac OS, and the iPhone, and you're interested in the iPhone, well, I have to watch this whole thing because I want to know what they're going to say. So lay out the agenda for them. Now, something that most people don't do, especially in corporate, that Apple is rigorous with, it is the process of rehearsal. They do not allow people to step on stage and deliver an entire keynote in front of the entire world without training, without knowing what they're going to say, without saying the words out loud. They rehearse over and over and over again like a professional athlete because they are professional athletes in their domain. But think about this. When we have team members whose job it is to present slide decks to clients, to go to the same sales conversations, to go to events and represent our product, our company, I can guarantee you very few of them take the time to rigorously practice. What they'll do is they'll say, oh, I know this because this is my job. I'm going to put all the material into a slide deck or use one that's been sitting around in the company file for a while, and I'm just going to go and present. So what ends up happening is they show up on stage or they show up on the client call completely unprepared. They know their material, but it's not polished enough, and because they've been doing it for so long, they don't even know what's wrong with it. So I'll give you a perfect analogy. Have you ever had a teacher who's been teaching for 20 years, 30 years, but they're just so boring you don't want to listen to them, right? So is experience the problem? No, they've been doing it for years. They've been doing it for decades. So what is the problem? The problem is they're so close to what they do. They've habituated to their style of teaching for so long that they don't even know they're not good. No one gives them feedback. No one looks at them and says, hey, how is a student supposed to stay awake for 3 hours listening to that? So many people do not go through rehearsal. They don't go through any sort of practice, and they certainly do not wash themselves back. Ask any employee or the average employee, how many times have you rehearsed this presentation that you're about to give to one of your most important clients? How many times have you said the words out loud before saying it the first time to the client? Have you ever seen yourself back on video presenting? Do you even know what you look like? Do you even know what you sound like? Because if we don't have any idea how we're presenting ourselves, we don't know how our idea is being received. And so often we'll have clients who say, yeah, I hired this person on my team and he's amazing. He knows the craft inside out. He knows the product inside out, but the customer isn't buying. But for some reason, they don't feel sold on our product. And I'll say, okay, my team will have a look at your presentation. We'll have a look at their presentation, and it is blatantly obvious that they haven't rehearsed. It's blatantly obvious that they're just looking for direction from the slide. So they will read the slide and say, oh, okay, this slide is about this. Yeah, so this is what this slide says. Next slide. So this is what they're figuring it out as we in the audience are figuring it out. And it sounds unprepared. It doesn't sound polished. You don't know where to pause. You don't know where to add transitions. It just doesn't sound very professional. The good news is it doesn't take a lot of time to make significant progress. It does take a lot of time to become a master. So let's say you've got the same presentation that you deliver to a client every single week. You have various clients onboarding, and you deliver the same presentation to them. What would happen, hypothetically, what would happen if you did the same presentation time and time again, but this time, every time you did the presentation, you watched it back, start to finish, and said, hey, what's good about it? What did I not like about it? Which parts were a little boring? Which parts were the audience not engaged with? Let me improve that for the next time. So by the time you get to the 10th time, you're not just doing the same thing again and again the same way without learning. You're doing it and improving every single time. That process of reiteration, that's what makes you really good. Now, yes, if you're doing this regularly, you should be practicing it as much as you can. But even if you have less time and you have a presentation coming up in 3 hours, 20 minutes, just say the words out loud. Because what will happen is you'll start going through the slides and you'll stumble, you'll stutter, you won't know what's on the next slide, or you'll see something on the slide and you won't be able to explain it properly. You won't find the right analogy. And now you know, holy crap, I'm glad I found this out now and not when I was on the call with the client. The analogy I like to use is pretend you're Taylor Swift. You're arguably one of the biggest pop stars in the world. And even though you have all these songs that you've written and you've sung at various locations around the world, 5 hours before you step on stage, you decide to write a song on a napkin and say, okay, that sounds pretty good. Let me go on stage and just sing this. How well will she do? She'll do a terrible job simply because she just wrote it. She doesn't know what it sounds like out loud. She doesn't know the rhythm. She doesn't know where to emphasize. She doesn't know the bridge. She doesn't know the chorus. You have to practice and you have to say the words out loud. And this is something that Apple does very rigorously. They rarely step on stage and just wing it. In fact, I don't think they ever do that. Someone I have seen who finds a healthy medium is Satya Nadella from Microsoft, the CEO. He's prepared with what he wants to talk about, but when he speaks in such a conversational tone that you can't even tell he's prepared. So what he'll do is he'll say, these are the 4 bullet points I want to talk about. First, I want to welcome everyone. Then I want to talk about where we are now. Then I'm going to connect it to what we're talking about today. Then I'm going to bridge that into the first product we're going to talk about. So he'll say something like, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to have you here. I want to welcome you in Auditorium A. And this is a very special place because Auditorium A is where we announced Windows 95 30 years ago. And it's very magical that we're back here in this place to announce a new development in Windows, blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about Windows, but go with me here. So this is what he would do. He wouldn't script it out, because if he scripted it out, it would sound like this. Good morning, everyone. Today, we are here at Auditorium 1. And Auditorium 1 is very... Can you see how it destroys the personality? So what happens is when you rehearse enough times like Apple, eventually, after a certain amount of rehearsals, because you know it enough times, you can deviate a little bit. You forget a word here or there, you rephrase a sentence here or there, it's okay, because you already have the presentation internalized. Now, if you're the leader of a team, the number one question I want you to ask people on your team is, how many times did you say the words out loud before you said it to the client? Because if you have these people going to talk to your clients and they've never said the words out loud, they don't know what they sound like, they don't know what they look like, you should be terrified. Right? I can't tell you how many people I've coached who they'll come and say, yeah, this is what I've been doing for 4 years, and I'll listen to the presentation and I'm shocked. Because sometimes it's so detailed, so many different technical jargons that by the end of it, I don't even know what I'm supposed to remember. And that's the next point, which is many people think I need to prepare a presentation. I need to have all of the documents together, all of the images, all of the points, all of the things our product does, and I want to hurl it at the audience. So here's all the stuff our product is made of. Here's all the technical features. Here's all of this, that. But let me ask you this. When you go through a hour and a half long meeting, how much of what's discussed do you actually remember? You probably remember 4 sentences or 2 sentences, important takeaways. And that's what you should start your presentation with. So before going into a presentation, you want to think, what do I want my audience to think, feel, or do once I'm done? What should that be? Do I want them to do something? Do I want them to feel differently about my product or the industry? What do I want them to think about this brand new product that we've announced? And what do I want them to remember? If they forgot 99% of what you said, but they remembered one single thing, what would that one single thing be? What one phrase would you want them to remember? So let's say you have an inspirational speech about believing in yourself, and you want them to remember, no matter what happens, believe in yourself. So that could be your message, okay? Now what you're going to do, your entire presentation and your entire speech is going to revolve around that message and enhancing that message, because that's the end takeaway. That's what you want the audience to remember. This will also eliminate fluff. So when you are saying things that have nothing to do with the message, you know it's not relevant and the audience doesn't need to know this. The biggest challenge people have when it comes to presentations is not that they don't have enough information, it's that they have too much information. Too much information will squeeze the audience out. They'll tune out because they cannot process it. So during a presentation, you've probably seen this when someone's pitching you or telling you about certain things, you're following, and then they're adding information, and eventually you think, holy crap, I don't even know where I am anymore. I'm just going to tune out. It's too much effort for me to figure out where they lost me. And you'll see this happen in the Q&As, because you'll talk for an hour and afterwards, any questions? No, I think we're good. Thank you for your presentation. Because they don't even know what to ask. They've been given so much information, they don't even know what to ask. So to round things up, here's what I want you to focus on. Here are some of my main takeaways that will help you. Number 1, if a presentation is important, make time to rehearse. Rehearsal is not putting the slide deck together. Rehearsal is saying the words out loud. Ideally at least 10 times, depending on the importance of the event. So never go into an important event or a presentation without having said the words out loud. That's number 1. Number 2, start with the end in mind. What is the end message you want the audience to remember? And ideally, the shorter and the more concise, the better. If it's a giant paragraph, the audience is not going to remember. What is one sentence or maybe 2 sentences you want the audience to remember? Write that down first, then create the presentation that builds up to that. So that's point number 2. Make sure they remember. An added bonus, number 3, is if you can, throughout the presentation, repeat the message. What gets repeated gets remembered. What gets repeated gets remembered. So if I say the same thing again and again and again and again, think about it like a jingle or a song with a chorus. What's that Rihanna song? Work, 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 work. It's the same word over and over and over again, but how easy is it to remember? Justin Bieber, baby, baby, baby. It's the same thing. With repetition, it sits in our head. So throughout your speech, can you say your message enough times where when someone's speech ends, they have no doubt about what the message is? So repeat the message again and again. You want to keep your opening more narrative. That's point number 4. So instead of, today we're going to talk about point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, point number 1, it becomes logical, it becomes boring, there's no excitement, there's no emotion involved, people will tune out. So you want to start with a bit of a narrative, because what it also does is it calms down the audience. When we're about to hear a story, what do we naturally have an inclination to do? Oh, let me lie down. Let me listen in. I don't have to do too much. I can relax. But if I say, I'm going to explain to you the 16 neural network framework of X, now I have to be extremely on my toes and focus on everything. You don't always want that. You want people to be relaxed and in tune and enjoying themselves, especially at the start. Because sometimes if you're doing a workshop, if you have different stakeholders in a meeting, there might be a little bit of a tension there, not because of conflict, but because people are just a little bit cold at the start. So you want to start off with a narrative. And then lastly, when you are presenting, just remember, you need perspective in order to improve. You can't do the same thing again and again. So point number 5 is when you do prepare and you do practice, get perspective from both yourself and other people. This would look like you recording your presentation. You going back and watching your presentation. That's how you know you've actually done a good job. That's how you know you can improve. I'll tell you this, it's a painful memory for me, but I was once called to do a keynote on public speaking, and I thought I could wing it. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to step up and I'm going to wing it. So I went there and I did an hour, and afterwards people said, hey, this was really good. We really enjoyed it. I said, amazing, thank you. Next time someone called me up, I did the same thing, did the keynote, hey, that was really good. Thank you so much. Again and again and again and again. And then one day my coach, my public speaking coach, he asked me, so how many referrals did you get off of that? I said, well, I didn't really ask for referrals. I said, no, you don't have to ask. People will just come to you and say, hey, can you come and speak for my organization? So, well, I've done quite a few keynotes now and haven't really gotten any referrals. And then he said, okay, that's interesting. Have you gone through your presentation? Have you watched it back? I said, no, not really, but I was told I did a pretty good job. And my coach said, well, no one's going to come to you after they hired you and say, hey, you did a terrible job. Yes, they'll tell you in an email a couple of weeks later, but not at the moment. So maybe you should watch it back. I said, okay. And then I watched it back. People were on their phone. People were not paying attention. Some people were walking out. And I was so absorbed in the moment that I thought I was doing a great job. So this is a painful lesson that I've learned, that you might think you're good because you think you're good. But other people need to think you're good, especially if you're presenting to your clients, you're presenting to a large room of people, stakeholders, investors. Get perspective. Watch it back. It's going to be painful. Get other people to watch you, make the improvements, reiterate, and you will get better. So these were the ways that you can become a masterful presenter, whether it's a keynote or a client presentation.